90 days as to the status of the tractor. And there had been some indication about wanting, from board members about wanting to put the tractor up for sale. At this point, I can't say that there's been any significant, measurable, additional time put on the tractor in the last 90 days. Do you want to clarify that, Karen?
We now have 15.3 hours, and I believe at the last original meeting we had 11 hours.
11.
And there has been no snow since we used it for no snow.
Correct. It's been mostly windstorms and transporting the man lift up to be able to repair campers.
So you're happy using it for maintenance purposes?
Yes.
If we got a heavy snow, you'd be able to use it?
Yes.
But it's not your preferred equipment.
As far as moving some of the equipment around, it's much easier to be able to look down at the ball there versus one person trying to back up a truck with a...
You know, I know that, but you had shared last time that it wouldn't have been the piece of equipment that you chose to do the snow removal and some roof lifting. So what I'm trying to make sure is that this is the piece of equipment you want, or would you prefer that we sell this piece of equipment and reinvest that money in purchasing the actual equipment that is desired?
I believe this piece of equipment would be adequate for what we need at this time without trying to spend more money towards something else.
That's what we need. I mean, you said it, I'm repeating your words to you. You said this wasn't the ideal piece of equipment. And so what I'm asking is a question about whether or not this is the right piece of equipment. I don't want any emotional attachment to who purchased it or how it was purchased. I don't want anybody's egos tied into anything. What I'm trying to figure out is this the right piece of equipment? And we were told by you once it was not your ideal piece of equipment. And so I'm asking because I might consider selling it in order to purchase the ideal piece of equipment. So if you have a chance to get what you really need, or you want to hang on to this, you're saying you'd rather just hang on to this than get what you really need.
What I'm trying to say is it's more cost effective to hang on to this piece of equipment at this time than to invest in a much more expensive piece of gear that we probably wouldn't necessarily use as much. And I don't think it would be cost effective to have the right gear for that.
Okay, when we had this discussion before, Kim, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. This is what I heard. If I had to do over again, I wouldn't purchase this piece of equipment. We had that discussion here, we had that discussion there. What is the piece of equipment that is more cost effective than this?
Something larger.
Give me
with a bigger
something.
bucket.
Give me the something larger. Backhoe,
No, probably a loader.
front end loader.
Correct.
Like what kind of a front end loader?
It would probably be, I couldn't tell you sizes and whatnot, but
1 yard bucket, 4 yard bucket.
probably at least a 3 yard bucket.
And that's a piece of 3 yard. You're looking at a big articulating loader that
Right,
you'd use on a,
which
in
isn't
a
cost
gravel pit.
effective for us to own. That's why.
Wouldn't you lease a piece of equipment like that instead of rent a piece of equipment like that when you need it? Because if you know, for example, I heard this thing about, well, when it's going to snow, you can't always get a piece of equipment. I know firsthand that if I'm anticipating the use of a piece of equipment down the road, I don't care if it's a week down the road, whether it's related to weather or it's related to a specific use, I can reserve that piece of equipment. I can reserve 6 of them. I can have them ready for you. It's a logistics planning thing. I cannot make the numbers work for what we have tied up in that. And even if we sold it at a discount at 15 grand, you can rent a comparable vehicle, piece of equipment, for 30 years if we have a snow event 3 times a year. Even if you did it for 20 years, you're still coming out way ahead by renting that piece of equipment. And that piece of equipment is costing us money sitting there not being used. because it's depreciating. So I don't get your logic that we need a bigger or a different piece of equipment versus leasing it, because it sounds like a piece of equipment that is seldom used. And what we've been into this thing now pushing 3 years on this equipment, and you have 14 hours on it? 15.3, excuse me. It doesn't make sense. When I looked at that piece of equipment, it even has the little nubs on the tires haven't even been worn off of the thing. It's been used so seldom. And when we look at the other pieces of equipment that we need, like fare boxes and radio equipment and stuff like that, we have at least $15,000 sitting out there in the middle of that bay, getting moved around when it's in your way and hardly used. So, for me, I have to see a much better supporting argument for keeping it than what I've heard so far.
Other than hours, I don't want to hear hours. How many occasions in the last 3 months did you find to use that piece of equipment? Because lifting a manhole cover might put approximately 2 minutes on that. Okay. How many times have you used it?
I would have to go back and look at the individual records, because every time it's used,
It's
there's
low.
an entry.
I think that would be better information than how many hours. We need to know how many times it would be used and how many times you would have had to rent a piece of equipment instead of using the piece of equipment you have. We just also need to know what the cost of renting that piece of equipment would be in lieu of using a piece of equipment you have. Hours don't tell the story. Usage does.
$200 a day. And
Okay.
$250 for
Okay,
a much
so-
larger system, larger equipment.
Okay, $200 a day. If you've used it 20 times, there's what, $4,000.
If you use 20 days.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm asking. How
Maybe use
many?
it 4 times in one day.
Okay, I'm asking how many times or how many days has it been used, not how many hours, because I think that would make it easier to make a decision. Hours of usage don't tell real usage.
One thing I'd like to find out, if he's satisfied with that piece of equipment, and it's already paid for, and doesn't have to be bought or rented, why are we messing with it? You're not talking that much money, sir. And if he can use it for whatever occasion he does, it's already here.
Agreed.
Snow removal, or a manhole cover, whatever, it's already paid for and done. So, it's kind of a neat issue to me. Just leave it sitting there and use it when you need it. Don't go out and sell it or buy something else or put money into a rental. And it's already here.
Whatever Rick's saying was a cost per hour usage is just.
It's negligible. To rent that system, it's not cost effective to keep it parked here versus the alternative. Let's go back on the history of this thing too. It was purchased in part of the grant that was disallowed, and the transit district had to give that money back. That's that and other things. And not just because Ken said if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't buy that piece of equipment. The alternative is it's so seldom used and it has to be maintained, when the alternative is so convenient to lease that piece of equipment. And I've checked with the rental company, they will deliver $200 a day for that size of a component. And for a larger one, they have about $250 a day. And so if you're gonna use it, I don't care if you use it. They were talking about snow at the time. If we had 3 events for snow removal, you lift your manhole lid for your stormwater collection structure, you separate it. That's your big lid that has to come up. There are alternatives to go, and that is something that is, I doubt that you guys even clean that once a year. There's just no silt that comes off your parking lot. I don't know what your schedule is, obviously, for cleaning that out. But in major parking lots, those things are probably not cleaned once a year because it separates the fines that settle to the bottom that have to be pumped out. What are you pumping that out with to get the sedimentation on the bottom?
We actually have a company that comes in and pumps that stuff
Right.
out.
And do they come in with a boom, don't they? They have a boom? a
Vacuum.
Yeah, a vacuum system. And a lot of those vacuum system, I don't know if the one you're using has it, but they have an equipment boom on those trucks too, because they know they have to deal with popping off major lids to do that. Do they have that on that vehicle?
I do not believe so.
That would surprise me. Lance?
Well, I very much agree with Councilman Bruce that this is going on and on. I think at the time, perhaps Ken answering, you know, that he would have purchased, but in retrospect now and looking at it and what it does, I absolutely think we have it, it's paid for. Renting something else, perhaps there's a liability at times if it was to be misused. People would have to be trained on the new whatever. I just think at this time, if we ask a gentleman that this is his area of responsibility, he's the manager, he's asked the question, he gives the answer. I mean, we can get through this on and on and on. It's like strawberries when they came in before fire.
What did you use before you had that to provide the same function?
We had a snow plow, but again, the facility was a lot smaller at that time, and that was adequate. One thing that we haven't talked about at all is, one of the reasons why it doesn't get used more is we have lost 3 bodies from facility maintenance when we did the layoffs. So we, on the priority list, utilizing that for some of the daily functions, is not something that we do now because it's not high enough on maintaining our buses.
Is a higher priority.
Right, so that is some of the reason why it hasn't seen as much use as we had hoped that it would. And the thing about the loader was, I was merely trying to answer Jill's question about the size of the vehicle. That if I was going to, if you were going to contract me to do this parking lot, I would want a bigger vehicle to do that.
To do the parking, to what?
To clean up the parking lot as far as snow removal or anything of that size. But I do think that between the plow and the tractor, it is adequate to be able to do what we need to do without having to purchase another vehicle.
But you already have the plow for your truck in the large areas. This was a concept for doing small areas.
Well, this was a concept. The plow only pushes snow so far before it becomes too much for the plow truck to handle.
Yeah.
The tractor was to alleviate that pot by moving these piles and be able to still have a clean open area versus having a pile here, pile here, pile here.
So Ken, if you have your plow, you can windrow and you can stack piles, I can see why you would want a large loader to lift that snow up and deposit it someplace to stack out of your way. Why wouldn't you rent that loader for those few days a month to move that large pile?
I think having
That little tiny bucket then is way inadequate. I mean, it's inefficient as heck. Your labor for the day is way more expensive than the piece of equipment.
The problem I have with renting it, one of the many problems I have with renting the equipment, the weather forecast isn't always right. So if they're calling for a possibility of snow, I'm going to have a piece of gear here because I'm going to be ready to react.
Yeah.
How many times do I rent a piece of equipment and not have any snow on the ground and basically, essentially waste taxpayers' money? I don't feel comfortable
So
with that.
if your plow is windrowing, then you can order a loader or hire somebody else to come in with a loader to move those large piles. That little tiny Kubota is way inefficient for moving any quantity of snow any distance. It really is. I can understand your argument that you need a different piece of equipment for that. I mean, you're talking about, you know, a large articulating loader with a 3-yard bucket. You know, that's how they move large quantities of snow.
Can I jump in here a minute? Okay, and before this turns into a filibuster. We've had this discussion over and over and over again, okay? For starters, and Lance brings up a good point. Mark this on the calendar. Lance brings up a good point. There's a training issue. You rent a piece of equipment, somebody's not trained on it, they get themselves hurt, you've got a huge L&I issue. Your rental companies aren't open 24 hours a day, so if the snow event happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, you gotta start bus service at 7 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever the case is. You have to have the equipment here. The equipment is paid for. It's not costing anything. It's back there, it's at our, to be used at our leisure. Personally, my vote is keep it, so I don't see why we just don't call it to a vote instead of sitting here and keep eating this up every 3 months. Let's make a vote.
Make a motion.
I make a motion that we
Do we
keep the
vote set
Kubota.
work sessions?
It's written on here that this is a special session with possible action on this matter. I want to take it, bring it to a close. We either keep it or get rid of it. I make a motion that we keep the Kubota with this issue today.
Okay, a motion been made to keep the Kubota by Mr. Hanold, second by Mr. Allen. Any further discussion?
I'm gonna vote to, I'm gonna vote against keeping it somewhat because it does cost us money in terms of depreciation, and because I do think that if we put that money in a set-aside account, we're earning interest on it while we're waiting for the times that we can use it to rent the piece of equipment that we need, so I just wanted to give rationale behind my vote.
You know, you're dealing with a $12 million budget here, right? This is a $15,000 piece of equipment. That's a penny compared to $12 million bucks.
And you gotta figure how much are we gonna get if we surplus it for sale.
And I would agree with you if this was an organization that didn't need to keep track of $15,000, but we're not at the point where we can look the other way. I mean, if this were Island County, I would totally be like, we're stable enough. I think what we have to remember about Island Transit is that we are not a cash-rich organization. We are a capital-rich organization, but we're not a cash-risk organization. And so I think that money in hand is actually more valuable to us than unused equipment that we have access to.
How is $15,000 going to save?
Well, it saves somebody's job during payroll crisis.
And it's going to add revenue to fair collection boxes. You know, I don't want to drop $1 to pick up a dime, to use that metaphor. At the same time, $15,000 is really important, and we come up to this value of $15,000. We paid $22,000 for this thing, $22,000, and 15 is probably the bottom line that I would want to sell it at. I wouldn't want to sell it for less than that. You put a bottom line on the thing, that margin is $7,000 for 15 hours. Is that cost effective? Absolutely not. I mean, look at all the equipment that you would rent for $7,000 for 15 hours. It doesn't make sense for me. I'm going to vote against it because I think there's more cost-effective alternatives. As far as this thing about L&I and all that kind of stuff, I could call somebody today, a contractor, and say, I need a loader delivered over here tomorrow or tonight, and I want to operate it. And that operator, he has the whole responsibility for delivering it, for doing all of the operation, and it's still cheaper than us messing around with it. So I'm looking for ways to improve our financial position, not for ways of just mere convenience. convenience, and I see this as a convenience thing. So I'll call for the question if there's no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to keep the Kubota, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries to keep the Kubota.
And I would make a motion to keep the gazebo decision where it stood. We made that once.
Mhm.
I'm gonna make a motion that we keep the same motion and that we approved before, which is that the gazebos stay.
I'll second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Johnson to keep the gazebos in the locations where they are until they rot. No, that's not.
That's good.
And the second was by Ms. Henderson. Any further discussion?
That's a get a dime for a dollar decision for me.
And I would agree with that. Any further discussion? All those in favor of keeping the gazebos, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. So, discussion regarding executive director's recruitment profile.
On page 4, I just have one word insertion. I don't know how you want to start this, of course I just jumped right in. Do you want to
Go ahead.
introduce it?
Yeah, would you mind raising your hand?
Page 4, last
The
paragraph.
presentation starts with Kim, so let's go
Okay,
from
sorry,
there.
Ken.
Okay.
Okay, the recruitment consultants, Hoffman, have asked for comments on the draft recruitment profile for the executive director position. Several drafts have been presented to me and to management staff relative to the document itself. However, I think it's most appropriate that the draft be critiqued and approved by the board rather than the current executive director and the staff, and that's why I passed it on to discuss it with the chairman and pass it on to the board. That the product is being contracted by the board, and therefore you should have the last approval on its content.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of questions on the compensation and benefits. Can you just briefly enlighten us with the 457 plan up to 6.2% match?
We currently have a 457 plan, which in essence is in the place of Social Security, which is 6.2. I don't know how they arrived at that 6.2 in the past.
Who's they?
Whoever implemented it in the past created the 457. It probably happened 10 or 20 years ago.
Is that created by Highland Transit?
Yes, there was a vote taken by employees to opt out of Social Security, and I think what happened, from what I gather, I had a conversation with Social Security about it, but I think the 457 plan was brought in, the 6.2 is the same amount that a Social Security amount is, so I think it was brought in to help offset that. I think it was a way of employees to have a retirement plan with Social Security. They could know how it was going to roll through in the future. So that's when this was established, about the same time.
So this is in lieu of Social Security?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. And is that appropriate for a executive director as opposed to a standard employee? Why would you want the executive director to be on Social Security plan?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I think an executive director being employed would just receive the same benefits as any other.
And then the other thing is 6 paid holidays. That's standard
That's
for,
standard.
okay. And then 5 floating days. What does that mean?
Well, I think the floating holidays are, you can use them by choice instead of, like, for example, if you were a federal employee, you'd probably get like 12 holidays, federal holidays per year. And it sounds to me like in this organization, they broke that up and they said, you won't be taking every holiday that you might see as a federal worker take or a state employee, that part of those, maybe half of those will be floating holidays. So it gives employees more choice.
So that's giving you basically 11 holidays. Okay, good.
But are some, I'm sorry, but are some of those,
I have the floor right now. I'll let you
and
interrupt
it's
when
taking
I'm
too long, and I
finished.
had a clarifying question.
Okay. And
Do
then,
you know if that includes Christmas?
that was my next question. We must have a list of
You know, there's a list.
what are paid holidays, and then floating holidays are unidentified.
That's right.
Okay. And then sick leave, vacation days, accruals, that's consistent with all of the other department heads or all employees, non-union employees?
I think everything is consistent with
All
all employees right now.
All employees, but we have representative employees too. Are they on the same package?
We currently are, but they are negotiating.
That's part of the negotiation
I got you.
process.
Okay, I hit off that one. And then 5 days compensated leave.
Passionate.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Compassionate. I'm talking, reading here. 5 days compassionate leave, is that accrued? Can they, that's just in that
Yeah, in the event of
anniversary year?
some the death of the family, that sort of thing.
Bereavement.
Yeah.
Bereavement,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Now, Ms. Johnson.
I mean, well, I was just gonna clarify those floating holidays. My preference is for an executive director that we would just give 3 weeks vacation. I mean, I think that at an executive level, 3 weeks of vacation is, and I don't care if it's a floating holiday, a paid holiday, or a compassionate leave. But I think, given the mental taxation on an organizational leadership, that 3 weeks vacation plus then a vacation accrual up to maybe 4 is appropriate, and I would not break those out. And I don't feel like it needs to be parallel to anything else we do in the organization. The executive director compensation could simply be different and set by us. But that's my thought on that is, I mean, why otherwise, that's not enough. 11 days, including floating holidays, which I somewhat take issue with the fact that most federal employees get 12. I don't believe that they do. There's a set number that pretty much everybody takes. But otherwise, I don't think that's enough leave, to be honest.
Got
But then they get
vacation.
vacation too.
Got vacation here.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, there you go. I was gonna say, well,
There's
how
no-
much time
there's-
off you giving them there, girl?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. And here's the other thing, is I obviously don't know.
Yeah.
Which is still somewhat concerning about this organization, that we've heard 2 guesses on what things mean in terms of employee compensation. So we think that the 5 holidays might mean this. So we're giving 6 paid holidays, 5 floating holidays, 5 compensation days, and vacation. How many vacation days are we giving?
Basically.
It's based on
Not
accrual.
compensation.
So somebody new comes on board and they accrue, a full-time employee accrues 8 hours per month.
Right, so my issue is we're basing our executive director package on standardized employee, and does anybody else think that's weird?
Yeah,
Let's just set our executive package.
Well, in the other, consider this, we have a range of 100,000 to 130,000. Why not get into negotiations and then balance those things out? Rather than be prescriptive and say, this is what you get. Because we're giving them a range on the salary package.
Well,
I
then
think
maybe we
have to
should,
get some idea, we're not gonna get people to apply.
Or what you're saying is don't specifically call out.
Or a vacation to be negotiated.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
call it out as negotiated. But
And-
I would think that somebody that's earning $130,000 a year would probably figure out that we can negotiate that.
And the other one is,
I would hope.
don't you want to list, at least I would want to have a notification on probation period too. I think there's negotiating these packages, the compensations kick in 100% after a probationary period.
And that would be, in my experience, during the negotiating process or the contractual process.
Then you vet that out.
With the hiring director.
So this
Also,
is-
Mr. Chairman, I might add that Lance has been,
I'm sorry.
had his hand up there for quite a while.
Thanks, Ken, my right arm got numb. So I switched to the left hand. I was curious, is the...
What kind did you drive the stagecoach with?
I've been on the T-Mobile buses. The sick leave and vacation accruals, is that considered PTO, paid time off? In other words, if a person, so it's separated into X amount of hours sick leave and X, how much can be accrued?
For this, it's negotiated, that's what we just said, it's
That would be negotiated.
Okay, well, the reason I'm asking is there's another public agency that the board is concerned with the amount of accruals that has been allowed. And it's quite a dilemma right now, so that's why I asked the question on how many hours can be accrued when we say sick leave and vacation.
It's set according to years of service.
Can I?
Yeah, Robin, you know that better than I do.
Vacation leave, you can accrue a total of 240 hours per year. That's all you can carry
Okay.
over. Sick leave does not have a cap on accrual. However, depending on how long you've been here, there is a buyout option. The buyout option is a percentage, and there is a cap, a ceiling cap on the amount of sick leave. So it never falls off, but the amount that you can actually buy out, there is a ceiling that is dictated by the number of years you've been here.
Okay.
So you get a percentage of your sick leave accrual up to that ceiling.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, I got it. Okay, thanks.
Which of the plans, Social Security or 457, is more beneficial to that woman, person?
Well, that's kind of hard to say because I don't know, you don't know where Social Security is going to be when somebody retires. The 457 plan gives the individual some control over that. They choose the plan they're in and choose the allocation, how much they want to apply to it. Now, our maximum, we will only match up to 6.2%, but the employee can contribute, as much as they want. So I think the idea when it was implemented was to give the employee the flexibility and more say in how their money was being put aside for retirement.
Would that be an option for, let's say, the new CEO coming in? and saying,
No, because Island Transit opted out of Social Security, so it isn't something as if that, if they come in as an employee, it would not be an option.
Okay,
Is all the Island Transit out of paying in Social Security?
Correct.
Everybody?
Correct. We have PERS, so while all of that was happening, the PERS retirement system, if you have PERS, you don't have to have Social Security. The state just wants to ensure that there is some kind of retirement system in place. If we went back to Social Security, I think there would have to be, I don't know if we actually can at this point, but there would have to be a vote and there would be a lot involved in looking at that.
Pierce did that. They went back.
They went back.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because you're not going to be an island, you're not going to be an executive director for your life. And if you are in part of the Social Security system, you're going to lose that amount of time in the Social Security system when you get out of this. And it sounds to me like it's not going to be beneficial to you.
Well, Jackie had a question.
Well, I
If you were
didn't-
finished, Brian. Okay.
Mine wasn't on the compensation, it was on something else, so maybe I'll add it when we're done with the compensation.
My recommendation was that we just put out the salary range and then just say that we have a rich benefit package and then we negotiate a executive director CEO contract that is based on that particular individual's needs. I am not comfortable tying it in with different employee benefits because it's a different position and we need to offer an executive package for it. So I think some of these details are way too much, need to be negotiated, and I mean, I just feel like it's, I understand why they're there, I just don't think that they're necessary for an executive level hire.
And maybe we should have an asterisk on this, that this is a range of benefits to be negotiated with the successful applicant.
The common language is to the extent of something like attractive benefits available, or attractive benefits included, or something to that extent.
Yeah, and then those can get negotiated out.
Yeah.
I would feel better than just listing these all out, because my guess is that there are gonna be thoughts and opinions, and I'm not gonna lose the right candidate over a vacation day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then also on the experience and education side, you know, I give some thoughts, and then I'd like to open that up to comment also. Bachelor's degree in public administration, general business administration, transportation planning, or related field, and instead of 5 years, 10 years of management experience in public and or the private sector in a related field is required. When the language says ground circuit transportation, that starts narrowing the field to maybe a smaller group of applicants. There are people, there are businesses that have experience in managing large organizations, equipment, labor relations, public relations, public finance, all that kind of stuff. And then where it goes on to say, next sentence is transportation experience including fixed routes, maintenance, finance, planning, marketing, customer service, human resources, and I'd like to add, and government relations. This organization is heavily dependent on government relations with our legislators and stuff like that. People who do not have any experience in dealing with the political side of things and understanding where the money comes from, it will be a disadvantage to us. Whether you call it lobbying experience, I think government relations experience is more appropriate, at least in my approach. Other comments from the rest of the board? And Lance?
On your sentence that you just read, could you replace, starting with the part that says planning or related field and 10 years of related management experience, period, and then just strike the rest of that sentence to keep it simple?
I agree.
I think
It's way too many words.
Okay.
I mean, does that get you where you want to go?
That's fine, yes. I just really want to put emphasis on government relations. But
Well,
we
that
can-
was
we
in the
can-
next paragraph, right?
Yeah, next paragraph.
Okay.
So read what you propose so that Meg can write this down, because we want to.
So beginning in the sentence that begins planning or a related field and 10 years of related management experience, period.
Okay. And you still want,
And then
that
strike-
sentence still starts transportation,
No.
planning,
No.
okay.
Well, then, we
Strike
put
all
a
that.
period there, and then I just struck the end of that sentence in a
But-
public ground transportation area.
Okay.
You can see it's
Got
required.
that. But where, so that sentence starts with the word planning and not transportation?
Well, there's a period after is required
Oh.
right now, and then transportation experience starts a new sentence, I thought.
It does.
So
Okay.
I'm just striking the last part of the first
Okay.
sentence,
Oh.
or the second.
I think they could say transportation experience.
She's not there yet, she's still in the first
Yeah,
sentence,
because all
right?
So the first sentence reads, a bachelor's degree in public administration, general business administration, transportation planning, or related field, and 10 years of related management experience. I think that related is
Yes.
specific
Yeah.
enough.
Yes.
Now, the next paragraph, I don't have
Now,
The next
is
paragraph.
required, then the next sentence carry on
we struck the rest of that sentence.
all the way down to the bottom.
So it's a, so the first sentence reads, a bachelor's degree in public administration, general business administration, transportation planning, or related field, and 10 years of related management experience, period.
Okay.
10 years of related management experience, period.
Period.
We're striking in a public ground transportation agency, parentheses, is required, period.
Okay.
Now, the next sentence I'm not involved in.
Okay, can I comment? I think that's the sentence I'm saying is entirely too wordy. I think it'd be transportation experience
And intergovernmental.
and intergovernmental, or transportation and government experience.
Government relations experience.
I think you're leaving out vital parts of the position. You're looking for a person to apply that's had experience. You know, planning, marketing, customer service, human resources. It's not too wordy when you're working on the 4th page. I mean, you got a lot of words before you get here.
And I guess some of my question, to your point, Lance, is including fixed route maintenance. Well, why would the executive director need to be an expert in fixed route
Well-
maintenance? Wouldn't that be the operations manager's job? And you need familiarity with HR, and HR are rules and laws, but that's your HR director's job. And marketing, in theory, is, I'm making that Meg's job. I mean, everybody should have an expertise in the organization, and the executive director needs to have the management skills to oversee that. But we're not hiring somebody who's an expert in every single department.
We'll never find
No,
out.
I understand that,
Okay.
except being familiar with the different facets. For example, a person's come up through the ranks to that, at least perhaps not being an expert, but being familiar with, if I or you were the manager, I'd want that person to basically be the expert, but not that I know more than that person. I just want them to be a good manager, but be familiar with all assets of route planning and marketing and customer service.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, can we, yeah.
Couple suggestions on that particular sentence. Number one, related to the discussion you were just having, maybe you would like to include in that statement, transportation experience in overseeing fixed route maintenance, finance, planning, whatever. But more importantly, if you're going to include fixed route, I think you definitely have to include paratransit, because paratransit is as equally or more critical in terms of knowledge than fixed route. I would highly recommend paratransit get in there if you're going to specify fixed route.
Okay, let's drop back and look at that first paragraph, because it gathers a lot of this information without being too prescriptive. Bachelor's degree in public administration, general business administration, transportation planning or related fields, and 10 years of management experience. 10 years of related, that's correct, of related experience, period.
So you're not having is required.
Right.
Do it in that sense. Okay.
That goes without saying. Because when you get the applicant, you vet that out. Then where do you want to go with how do we get in public or private, in the public or private sector? Doesn't it go for 10 years managed experience in the public or private sector, period?
Related management experience, you could say in the public or private sector.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you want to just stop it and delete transportation experience, including fixed route maintenance, finance? Because a lot of that stuff is, if we're going to get somebody who has experience that we're looking for, that will be vetted in the application review process, I think.
I would think that somebody coming in, or that the search firm that we hired to do this is going to vet the candidates to ensure that they have experience
Yes.
in all matters concerning the transit agency. That's what they're being paid for. I don't think we need to write out every individual.
I agree.
Because I think then we limit, because then somebody looks at this and says, geez, I have all these, but I
It's
don't
too
have
many.
any marketing,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm not gonna
Yeah,
apply.
yeah.
And we would just tend to lose maybe.
I agree with that, yeah.
What
Well, I
if-
mean, that's just like the compensation package, just, it should just say $130,000 a year generous benefit package.
Although I don't want a bank
Yes.
president necessarily to apply, right? They're gonna have 10 years of management experience, and that may not be the direction we're headed. So, as a suggestion, I mean, I guess they could apply, that's fine. As a suggestion, what if we started the second sentence with familiarity, someone said it.
We got it, we got it.
Familiarity with transportation, including fixed route maintenance, paratransit, finance planning, marketing, government relations, customer service, and human resources is
Period.
expected,
There you
or
go.
something, because we do expect you to have some familiarity
Right.
with these things.
Say that slowly for Robin and Meg, whoever's writing this.
Well, I wanted to talk even before they write.
I agree.
No, I like that.
Good.
Yeah.
What?
Well, we are micromanaging, because we're the ones who are picking the director.
But all that's gonna come out in the interview process. You know, I don't think you need to detail it out like that. You're kind of, it's kind of, you don't do all these things.